Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we're going to paint one of my favourite flowers, the wisteria. So grab your paints and let's get started. Right, so on the table here I've got a piece of paper that is 6 inches by 6 inches by 8 inches, and I've drawn a rectangle here, and it's probably more useful to do in centimetres. It's the outer rectangle is 4.5 centimetres across and it's 7.5 centimetres tall, and I've just done then a slightly smaller rectangle, but the bottom line is all the same. So what I've made here is a little door frame, and now I'm going to just sort of place in a rather wobbly branch that comes down both sides. I've got it coming in from the left because I'm left-handed. It feels like a natural way to do it, but of course you can have it coming in wherever you want. And essentially we want to place just a few extra little branches coming off. I like the little overlap there, and I don't need those anymore. So what we're going to begin with is a very, very, very faint wash. Just getting a very sort of gentle sense of the colour of the cottage walls. And what I've got here is a mixture of burnt sienna, Paynes Grey and Cobalt Turquoise, and it's going to make a very, very, very faint sort of slightly tealy shadow mix, but you can see it's so dilute that we're barely gonna see any colour. But the reason I've got a bit of teal in there is because I'm going to end up painting my front door teal. But all I want at the moment is to cover over the sort of wall area that is going to be where the wisteria is going, because I just want to get a sense of some of the wall. So I've just started by placing in some with my size 2 brush, just a bit of a wash, and then I'm going to just sort of dab the brush to get it coming outwards. It's so faint, and I wonder if you can even really see much of it, but it's giving us just a little bit more context. And now I'm really sort of scrubbing the brush around. You know how much I love these brushes, but just yet another thing that's amazing about them is how you can sort of treat them a little bit mean, and they will keep on providing. They will do well. The only bad thing you can do with your brushes is to store them bristles down in a jar of water when you're not using them. That's the worst thing you could do, really. But the rest of the time, they are very hard-working, hardy brushes. Okay, so this is just sort of creeping outwards, this colour, really nice. And then we're going to let it dry, and then we can start painting in our wisteria. Now wisteria, I'm going to paint the purple wisteria. I do have Cobalt Violet here, which is a pretty perfect wisteria colour, but if you don't have Cobalt Violet in your palette, you could always mix a bit of permanent rose with one of the blue tones. And in fact, what I am going to do, because I'm always keen to stress that you should never just use a single colour if you're painting anything natural, there should always be variations of it at play. So I'm just getting my French ultramarine mixed up here, placed in my palette there. I'll pick up some permanent rose, and we've got ourselves a very lovely, rather bluey purple. So at the moment that's very different in tone to Cobalt Violet, but having them all together in the palette means that I can just pick out what I want to use. And there I've got some really nice colour choices. So we'll just let this dry and then we'll get on with it. Painting wisteria is detailed and a bit fiddly, so I'm going to be using my size 4/10 brush quite a lot. And I've picked up some green gold here to begin with, and I'm going to begin with painting in a vertical line, cleaning my brush off, and then I'm just going to begin to draw some of that colour off the central stem and just create just a few little branches coming off that wisteria. Now, yes, I know we all think of wisteria as the purpley colour, but there is a very, very distinct yellowy green stem down the middle of it, which is really important to convey, because you often see a wisteria fully in bloom, and so you see a lot of the green. So now I'm going to pick up some of my purple, and I'm now going to add some of that colour, and because I wasn't using a huge amount of the green, it means that I can just add little bits which will sort of blend on top of the green and not show up too much. Okay, so that's the first stage. We need to make sure that's dried by the time we add on any more. So we're going to now repeat the process as many times as we want wisteria painted on our piece. I think a lot of people will paint these and think, this just looks a bit like a bunch of grapes. Well, they may well look like some grapes at the beginning, but trust me, it'll start to all come together. So I'm looking for vertical lines coming off my branch. That's why it's important to have as many sort of twists and turns and wiggles on the branch as possible. But what we can also do is create a few extra little opportunities to place these wisterias. So for example, you can always create, oh, I need green on my brush. It's very important that your green gold is nice and dilute, otherwise it will muddy the purple. Ooh, a bit of fluff. And at this point it doesn't matter if the various flowers bleed into one another, because we're keeping it nice and a light touch. So we're going to just cover the whole of our branch with these lovely first level of wisteria flowers. Once we've come all the way around here, this one will be nice and dry, so we can now mix up a slightly stronger colour, but also I think it's very important to have a different tone of purple going on now. So I'm just mixing up some Cobalt Violet with some of the French Ultramarine Blue, just for a slightly bluer purple, because there is a lot of blue in the wisteria. Okay, and I've still got my 4/10 brush. This is a sort of fairly dilute. Thing is, Cobalt Violet is quite a thick paint colour just by its nature. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint these dots just sort of down the middle. And what's also happening is, having this different colour, it's just sort of rounding the shape of the wisteria. I mean, usually you have a lighter colour in the front and the darker colours come from the sides to sort of create this sense of roundness, but it's not always the case, and we'll still pop in a little bit of shadow and things. So this is your next stage. It must be dry when you pop these dabs of colour in, but you can see just these ones compared to these, just they're sort of coming alive just a little bit more. Now we've got our wisteria flowers painted in, I'm looking towards the branches. Now again, even though burnt sienna would work really nicely as a branch, it's really important to have some other colours in the mix. So we've got yellow ochre and Paynes Grey here, and I'm going to use a 2/10 brush, and I'm going to begin over here because this is where the branch is the thickest, where it has begun, and so I'm just starting with the lighter colours and then adding in little bits of the dark Paynes Grey, and it's going to get thinner as we go along. And I'm just sort of pressing down the bristles to create thicker and thinner lines as I go along, and also tiny bits of unpainted space that also help create light and shade. And then once we've painted in this, we can add in leaves to really pad everything out. And you might find at that point that there might be a few more wisteria flowers you want to add in, but it really starts to fill out once we add in the leaves. For the leaves, I'm just adding a bit of Sap Green and Green Gold together, and I'm going to go back to my smallest brush, my 4/10, and we're going to paint in a load of lovely leaves. So the leaves on a wisteria have quite a long branch and then lots of leaves coming off at both sides. So this is your sort of classic watercolour leaf exercise. So we've got a branch, and then we're going to use the tip and squish the brush down, tip and squish, tip and squish. And it's getting a little bit smaller towards the end, and you just find that they spring up all over the place on a wisteria. So just find the gaps, and these will very much fill them up. Try and keep the nib of the bristles nice and thin. I think we can probably paint an even thinner branch than that. Let's see. Yeah, that's a bit more like it. So you can see how suddenly things are really starting to fill out. And then play around with scale and size. Might do some slightly smaller leaves, or ones just sort of coming from nowhere. We're just trying to, give it a nice fullness. And I think what is also really nice is remember to have things just sort of sticking out a bit, sort of not quite going with the rest of the grain. We want nice sort of imperfect organic angles. And the 4/10 brush I find is perfect for this because I can paint the leaf in one brush stroke. You always want to try and find the brush that will do your leaf or your petal in a single stroke or in as few brush strokes as possible, because that's always the best option with watercolour. At this stage, we're going to now look back at our door. So I'm going to draw in a bit of detail on the door. We're going to have a diamond window and maybe a letterbox. That's quite a wide letterbox, isn't it? Maybe one about there. And then I want to have some kind of oak panelling down the front. And then we're just going to paint in some nice light washes, and from that we'll then have everything sort of painted in as a nice basic wash, and then we can finish off with detail and shadow. So I'm going to paint my door in Cobalt Violet. No, what am I talking about? Cobalt Turquoise, here we are. I've got my size 4 brush, just waking up the colour, and you know what, I think this is a good point actually to change over my water. There we go, nice clean fresh water here, and you know, I'm going very, very light indeed. You might find that you want a bit more control, so you can go down the size of your brush, just make sure it's clean. That's what the kitchen roll is there for. And when you get up close to the wisteria, you can just use barely any colour on your brush. As I said, we're just doing this in a very nice faint wash. So what I'm doing with these oak panels, well, oak panels, it's painted wood, isn't it? But I'm just starting on the left-hand side of the panel with a bit of colour, not much colour. Then cleaning off my brush, taking all the colour off it, so that it's almost invisible by the time it gets over to the other side, therefore creating a nice sense of a panelled door. And you can also add maybe a little bit of shadowy brown to the ground underneath. I just clean off the water from my brush to blend that out to nothing. Now we've got pretty much everything painted. Obviously we've got the door furniture and the window not quite done, but those are going to be final detail bits. So now we can enjoy putting in a bit more detail onto the wisteria. So one thing that does need doing, a little bit of sap green. I'm now going to just add a little bit more detail to my leaves. So what I'm doing there is I've got sap green up the stem, then I clean my brush off, and then I just draw the colour out from there, because if I tried just literally painting sap green and then sap green all on the edges, it would be really strong, it'd be too much. But just doing it in this way, where you've got the stem, clean off the brush, it's still wet though, and you're just drawing the colour outwards like that. Right then, so we're on the home straight. I'm now getting a bit of concentrated Cobalt Turquoise and just using my 4/10 brush to add a little bit of wood texture to the door. Not a huge amount, but you can see how the sort of slight dry brushing of that initial stroke actually looks quite good. And then we can add a little bit of window reflection, so we'll get a bit of shadow here, maybe a little bit more blue in the shadow. There we go. Just allowing for some unpainted space there. And then I'm going to do cast iron door letterbox and a little door handle. So I'm going to mix up some Mars black in with my Paynes Grey. I'm just going to tilt this so I can do it. So I'm painting a sort of outer edge of a letterbox. So in America, I don't think you have letterboxes on front doors, do you? You have the mailbox at the end of the garden. Well, we have them right in our front doors, so it means we don't have to leave the house. The postman comes right up to the door. And then I'm just going to do a little sort of rustic countryside style door handle thing, and then I'm just going to, with a clean brush, just sort of wash inside the middle of that there. Okay, so we've got a lovely wisteria over a door, but it wouldn't be complete without a bit of shadow. This is where it really comes to life, in my opinion. So we need to make sure this is nice and dilute, not too strong. And then you need to decide what size brush you want to do your shadow in. Size 2 is pretty good because it allows us to get quite a nice bit of coverage. So don't fret, you don't have to do it everywhere. But what we do want to do is to get a sense of the shadow coming down over the door. So remember your wisteria, all these petals. Excuse me, I don't know why I've got such a frog in my throat. All this talking, I'm not used to it. And then a bit of shadow there, just underneath the box there. You could also have just a little bit sort of by there. Doesn't have to be everywhere, but it's quite sensible to just place it in underneath where there's maybe a bit of space. And as long as you're doing it nice and dilute, however strong and strange it feels at this point, it will mellow out, I promise. And there we go, a wisteria around the door. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that one. I want to say a massive thank you to my patrons for their support, because that support enables us to keep creating videos like these that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and comment below to let me know how you got on with that one. And if you're sharing your work on social media, tag me at thewintonpaperco.com on Instagram, and I'd love to see your paintings. Okay, if you never want to miss another video, just hit that subscribe button and the little notification bell, and we'll see you next time. Bye!